Hey guys, I wanted to go live today and share more about the creative process. I have been talking about that a bunch on my stories and in my posts. So I thought I would give you guys the 5 or so steps that I follow when I am following the creative process to do anything. It could be cleaning your house. It could be planning your Christmas shopping. It could be getting a party ready. It could be figuring out what you want to do with your life. It could be figuring out a product that you want to make. I've been doing it for a project that I'm doing for my work, and I'm happy to share the details of it. It's a workbook that I'm planning on making. And the 5 steps I'm going to share, and then at the end I'm going to wrap it up with a thought on how to make this easier for yourself, kind of a guiding principle to work by. So the first step that usually happens for me, and when I'm talking about the creative process, it isn't something that's limited to artists or making art, but we're using those same ideas about how art is made to apply them to accomplishing something that you want to accomplish. And it could be a actual physical thing that you want to accomplish. It could also be something in your mind that you want to accomplish, a mindset shift. So it's sort of meta, the mindset shift to create a mindset shift. Let me just break it down into the 5 steps for you to make it a little bit easier. The first step that I usually start with is just jotting down thoughts as I go. They're just random thoughts about what it is I'm sort of interested in doing. Or for instance, on this workbook, I had an idea about it that I wanted it to be different and maybe include doodling. So I made a note of that. And then I had another thought, I could send my favorite pen with the doodling. This happens to be my favorite pen, by the way. I don't know if you guys know of this Pilot Razor Point. It is so good. I love it. Anyway, I thought, there's a note. I can include my favorite pen. So basically, I just write down things before I forget them, because being 55, I forget things pretty easily. So I start with a bunch of notes. My second step then is to kind of, from those notes, form a guiding vision. This is step 2. A guiding vision is not a concrete vision. It is an idea of where you would like to end up. And the beautiful thing about it is that you don't have to know exactly what that is at this point. This is an idea of where you want to end up. Sort of the same way an artist may have an idea of a painting that they want to paint. They don't know exactly what that is going to look like, but they have an idea of what they'd like to paint. This landscape, for instance, they would like to paint that. They don't know exactly how that's going to turn out. They are going to follow steps that lead to other steps. And we're doing the same thing with the creative process. So your guiding vision is this just general idea of what you want to accomplish. It could be, I would like to get my Christmas shopping done by next weekend. So if that's what you really want to get done, there are a lot of different ways to get that done. But having that guiding vision will help you know what the right steps are for you to take it. Another example could be that you want to plan a dinner and you want that dinner to feel relaxed but beautiful. You want to enjoy the process. This is kind of the vision for yourself that helps you know what are the steps that you need to take to get there. Could be losing weight, could be creating a sewing project. Everything that we make in the world, everything that there is, this creative process can be applied to it, and you can use it to make it easier and make it inevitable that you will end up where you want to be. So the second step was creating this guiding vision. The third step is having a sort of brain dump, putting all of the things that you're thinking about that could possibly go into this project on paper. And for me, it looks sort of like this. A bunch of just different things written in different places. It's not a list, because that to me feels restrictive and prescriptive. It's much easier for my brain if I just sort of write them in different places all over the page. And then I end up writing these boxes around them, because that's sort of like doodling thinking time for me. Everybody can do this differently. Maybe you'll circle things to separate them. For me, writing those little boxes actually helps me take in that idea and think about whether it's something that actually applies to this or not. So just letting your brain run free. You may eliminate some eventually. You may split some into multiples at some point. But just let your brain unload all of the details that go into this project that you're thinking about, this vision that you've created in the step before this, all the things that could possibly contribute to making that vision into reality. So I do this, I wrote at the top my vision, just a brief description of it, and then all these different details about what needs to happen, what I need to think about, what I need to figure out, what are potential ideas. And then the next step is that I put a number next to them. I don't think you can see it, but I've crossed them out as I've gone. I put a number next to them as a general guideline for whether it needs to be done at the beginning or the end of the process. So this is just more guidance, and it's not hard and fast. It's not something I'm locked into, but it gives me an idea. So for instance, choosing a topic for this workbook that I'm working on is close to the beginning. It doesn't necessarily have to be the first thing. I actually put as the first thing, find out the costs of printing and binding. And so sometimes you also may want to make your first step something that's a really low bar, a low barrier of entry to get you going. If you're somebody that has a hard time jumping into projects, give yourself a really easy first step. Choosing a topic feels a little bit more onerous to me, so I put it at number 3. I ended up with a bunch of 3s, and so then in my next step, I take all of those items and I put them into a logical order. So I put them in a list, a numbered list, and this requires that I look at each of those items on this and say, do I want to do that first or second? Do I want to do that second or third? And so, none of this is hard and fast. I can always change my mind. I can always adjust. But making a decision has its own momentum and helps you move forward on a project. The other thing that you may discover is that you need to break some of these topics down into smaller and smaller steps until they don't feel very difficult at all, so that it isn't the kind of thing that you think, oh, I just need to set aside time to do that. If the best thing is if you could just do it in 10 minutes and break every little step of this process into something that could be done very quickly. For instance, if choosing a topic feels too big of a project for me, I could give myself the task of list 10 potential topics or 5 potential topics. And then I could have another to-do be list 5 more potential topics. So you can break it into smaller and smaller chunks. And then the next step could be narrow it down to 3. And the next step could be sit with 1 overnight and see how that feels. So making this as easy as possible is the point of following the creative process. So the step after adding it into an ordered list and breaking it into the smaller pieces is that you just start doing it. You do your number one thing. You dive in, and if you need to make adjustments along the way, you can. And that's my sort of overarching advice for using this, is keep it fluid. You're working with a creative vision. It's a creative idea of what you want. That idea will stay the same, but how you get there, there's so many different ways to skin a cat. There's so many different ways to get where you want to go that it really pays to be open, because along the way you may get new information that gives you a different option that you didn't see or have before. So in the creative process, it's really important is to remain fluid and to remain flexible. This is not SMART goals. This is not get it done. This is how to create something that is something that will be really satisfying for you. It's also, the value of this is also staying in this mindset of creating. It keeps you out of that downward spiral of saboteurs telling you you can't do something, or those voices of doubt that you might have in your head. When you're in the creative process, it's really hard for those voices to affect you. You're focused on something completely different than your ego. You're just focused on this project. This creative process is everything. It's what consumes you, and you take yourself out of it. Your identity is not tied to this project or how this project is coming out. This creative thing, this thing that you're creating, has value in and of itself. And so it's a way of sidestepping all the kind of things that get in our way when we're trying to make something happen in our lives, or when we're trying to have something that we want. Often we can, we have a lot of negative self-talk. There are a lot of things that, that get in our way. I know you can relate to that. I have a lot of that too. But when you're in a creative process, it totally circumvents that, and it allows you to be focused on, hi Hessel, how are you? This is something you might be able to relate to, I bet, because building a business is something that you probably are engaged in the creative process, whether you know it or not. Making something happen, bringing something into reality. There's so many steps that go to it, and having that vision of where you want to go is the guiding principle. It's the guiding vision that you're following, and then all these little steps along the way help you have momentum and create this inevitability of where you're going to end up, which is with a version of your original vision that you have chosen in this creative process. So I just went over the 5 steps for creating something. It starts with jotting ideas down. I'll just review real quick. Jotting ideas down as they come so you don't lose them. Just any little idea that you have about this idea of a thing that you might want to create. If it's a business, you might jot down how you want to feel, where you want to work, what kind of people you want to be around. Any little thing that comes to mind, jot it down so you don't lose it. Use that then to form a guiding vision. Form an idea of what you would like to accomplish. If it's a business, have this kind of idea in your head of how that works, what kind of general plan you want to use for it. If you're doing your, for instance, Christmas shopping, an idea of when you want to get it done and how you want to feel doing it and what you want that to end up being. The third thing is then write down on a piece of paper all the little things that could go into accomplishing this. Planning a day to go shopping, planning when you're going to wrap things. With a business, it's all details of how you're going to set that business up, who you need to talk to have something happen, what kinds of things you need to have in place, so that you have all the details that you can think of on one piece of paper. The second step after that is, or the third step after that, I guess, is to, it's the fourth step, to put them into a number, give them numbers. So whether they are something that you're going to feel like it needs to be done at the beginning or the end, if there's things that need to happen before other things can happen, number them that way on your sheet. I end up with a lot of the same number because as I'm doing it, I'm not sure. And that's where I sometimes will break these into smaller pieces for my ordered list. This list that is sort of in order, the steps that I'm going to take. So often I will break something into a smaller chunk in order to make it easier for me to get going on it. And then you just dive in and start doing the first thing. And the guiding principle to stick with here is that you remain fluid, because this is a creative process that you're in. It's not a SMART goal driving toward getting something done. This is creating an experience for you as you create the thing that you want. So remain fluid. It's an art project. One decision leads to another decision, and sometimes other opportunities or ways of seeing will open up as you're doing it. If you have any questions about this creative process and how you can use it in different ways in your life, feel free to send me a DM. I'm happy to talk more about this. I have found it to be super helpful in getting out of my own way. Having that kind of self-talk in my head that sometimes derails me or keeps me from starting something, putting myself into this process of creating is the best way I have found to circumvent that negative self-talk and actually focus on something without my ego and without my identity being invested in it. It has its own value. This thing that I'm creating, it ends up being something, of course, that I'm proud of, but in the process of doing it, I am not derailed by my identity being tied to it. This creation, this thing that I'm making, either it's a business, it's a workbook, it's Christmas shopping, this has its own value. I value it for itself, not for how it makes me look or how it makes me feel. It is something I want to do and create for its own sake, and then it has its own momentum. That's it. I just wanted to share that this morning. I hope you are having a good morning, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye. Thanks.